Okay, so today we are going to go over solving quadratic equations by factoring, and then we're going to have a quiz on solving quadratic equations by factoring. And then Friday we will have a test. The test on Friday will cover graphing quadratic equations, which means parabolas. Right, and there's two forms of the equation that we learned. One was the vertex form, which is y equals something like x minus 4 squared plus 3. That's our vertex form. And we know our vertex is what? What's our vertex? 4, 3. We know our axis of symmetry. X equals 4, right? X equals 4. Okay. And then we have our standard form. And that's the y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And we can find our axis of symmetry. By using the formula x equals negative b over 2a. We also know our vertex. It's going to be a point. We substitute the x into the equation. We know our y-intercept. That's going to be our c value, right? So when we have a standard form, remember we would put a little dotted line where the axis of symmetry is, and we have a y-intercept, and we have a vertex, and then we find another point that's mirrored, and we have a nice graph of our parabola. Okay, that's our standard form. Okay. Also on the test, we'll be solving using the quadratic formula. And then lastly, it'll be solving by factoring. Okay. Okay, so we're going to take a few minutes just to review the solving by factoring. Okay, so this test is when? Friday, yes. Please don't be absent, okay? Unless you're sick. Putting it off is not going to help, right? Okay, so solve by factoring. So the idea behind solving by factoring uses what we call the zero product rule. Okay. And the zero product rule basically says if I have two things, right, I don't care what they are, two things that I multiply together and they equal 0, what does that mean? At least one of them has to be 0, right? One of them or both of them have to be 0. That's the zero product rule. So if we look at a factored equation. And we learned how to factor earlier this year. Okay, we look at something that's already factored. This is two things that are being multiplied together, right? So I've got one right here, and then here's another thing right here. I'm multiplying those two things together, and they equal 0. That means that at least one of them, either the 7n minus 2 has to equal 0, or the n plus 1 has to equal 0, or both of them equal 0. So what we do is we set up two separate equations, and we solve the equations. So in order to solve this one, I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. I get n equals negative 1. Well, look what happens if I put that negative 1 in there. Right here, I get negative 1 plus 1, which equals what? 0. So I'm going to have something times 0. I don't even care what this is because I'm multiplying it by 0, so it's going to equal 0. So this is one of my answers. The other answer comes from solving the other equation. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides and then divide by 7. So there's my other answer. If I plug that in, it's going to make this 0 here. Yes?
I'm confused why you would put it as a fraction.
When I solve it, I have to divide by 7 on both sides. So 2 divided by 7 is 2 over 7. Okay? It's okay to get fractions as an answer, and it's okay to get negative numbers. It's even okay to get 0 as an answer. Decimals is okay as long as it's something that's terminated. Like, we wouldn't want to write this as a decimal because 2 divided by 7 is a decimal that we would have to round, and that's not going to be accurate. If it was like 1/4, that's a decimal that terminates, that ends. I don't have to round that. If you have to round the decimal, leave it as a fraction. Okay? And you can use your calculator to put it back into fraction form. Okay? All right, let's look at another one. Let's say that we have 3x plus 4 times 2x minus 5 equals 0. Tell me what x equals. I'll let you do that yourself. I'll be right with you. Okay, you shouldn't need a calculator for this, guys. Right? How do we do this? What do we do? Set up two equations. 3x plus 4 equals 0. 2x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, let's solve the first one. How do we solve this?
Minus 4 on both sides.
Yeah, minus 4 on both sides. So we get 3x equals negative 4. And then what? Divide by 3. So x equals negative 4/3. Just leave it like that. No calculator necessary. And over here we add 5 to both sides. And then divide by 2. No calculator necessary. Yes, sir.
Is it alright if I put, like, oh no, that wouldn't be right, never mind. Sorry.
Okay. So just to help me understand maybe where you're confused, what were you using the calculator for? Those of you that grabbed a calculator. Anna, what were you going to use it for?
I don't know. I was just trying to figure out how to do it.
Okay. Yeah.
It could be x equals negative 1.25 and x equals 2.5, right?
No, 4/3 is not 1.25, so no. 4/3 is 1 1/3, which means we'd have to round. So you want to leave that as a fraction. That's what I mean. You don't need a calculator because you don't have to change those fractions into decimals. Just leave them as reduced fractions, and that's perfectly fine. Okay. Okay. So I've given you easy examples. Yes, sir.
Also, say one of my answers is like 6/12, just that's how.
1/2. Yeah. Okay. So these are already factored, right? Sometimes we're going to get problems that are not factored, like this. X squared plus 8x plus 12 equals 0. Okay. Now, one thing that's absolutely necessary is it must equal 0. It has to equal 0 because what are we doing? We're using the zero product rule, and it doesn't work if it doesn't equal 0. Okay, it has to equal 0 in order to do this. All right, so we're going to factor. Now remember, we learned how to factor earlier this year. So don't panic over this. I need two numbers that multiply to equal 12, but add up to 8, 6 and 2. So that means I have x plus 6 times x plus 2 equals 0. Okay, so on these problems, you have to do the extra step. See, up here, I gave them to you already factored. Now on this one, you have to factor it yourself. And then the rest is the same. So what do we do?
X plus 6 equals 0. X plus 2 equals 0.
There you go. Okay. So here we're going to subtract 6 from both sides. So we get x equals negative 6. Look, no calculator, right? Subtract 2. So we get x equals negative 2.
And then
Okay.
that would be the answer. Right?
That's the answer. Questions on that one? Okay, let's look at another one. How about x squared plus 5x equals negative 4? What must it equal?
0.
Must equal 0. So how do I get this to equal 0?
Add 4 on both sides.
Yeah, add 4 to both sides. Good. Add 4 to both sides. Okay. Now when we add 4 on the left, we get x squared plus 5x plus 4. There are no like terms, so I can't combine anything. And on the right, we get 0. Okay. Now what?
Got to find one that.
Anna, you have a question?
Oh no.
Oh yeah, what do I do?
X plus 4 and X plus 1.
Excellent, good job. X plus 4 times X plus 1 equals 0. So now we have X plus 4 equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0. Listen, don't skip this step. Some of you want to skip this step and then you end up making silly mistakes. Okay? Write it out. Doesn't take that much effort to write that out. So now I'm going to subtract 4, so I get x equals negative 4. Subtracting 1, I get x equals negative 1. Okay? Write your steps out because it's not real hard. You don't want to make silly mistakes when it's not necessary. Okay, now the factoring gets harder. For instance, let's look at this one. 3x squared plus 23x plus 40 equals 0. Okay. So this factoring, because there's a number in front of the x squared, because it's not a 1. See over here, this is a 1 here, right? Because this is not a 1, we have to use the Murray method, right? So we factor the 3x squared as 3x times x. We factor the 40. I'm going to try 8 and 5. Okay. We have 40, we could do 1 and 40. We can do 2 and 20, 4 and 10, 5 and 8. I just chose to try 8 and 5, and I think that actually was the right one to start with. We're going to check it. We're going to cross multiply. 3x times 5 is 15x. This is just me checking it. And then x times 8 gives me 8x. That adds up to 23x, which means it's correct. So that means my factors, they go straight across. So we have 3x plus 8, x plus 5 equals 0. So we're right back to the same thing again. It was just a little harder to factor. So now we have 3x plus 8 equals 0. X plus 5 equals 0. So this one's easy. I'm just going to subtract 5, so we get x equals negative 5. And then over here, I'm going to subtract 8, so I get 3x equals negative 8. And we'll divide by 3, so x equals negative 8 over 3. And those are my two answers. Let me see what you got written down there, RJ. What you got written down there? All right, let's look at another one. Let's look at 6x squared minus 19x minus 20 equals 0. Okay, so these are the hardest type because the 6x squared can be factored two different ways. We can do 1x and 6x or 2x and 3x. Which one do you want to try? Doesn't matter.
2 and 3,
2 and 3? Okay. Now 20, we can factor 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. And one of these numbers has to be negative because that's negative. Want to just start with the 4 and 5? Got to start somewhere, right? Make one of them negative. Then what do we do? Cross multiply to check it. Good. So we get 10x plus negative 12x. So that didn't work. It's not even close. Bless you. So let's switch the 4 and 5. I'm going to switch the 4 and 5. let's see, I get 8x plus negative 15x, and that's not even close either. Okay.
We got your 6 and 1.
Yeah, let's try the 6 and 1. The 2 and 3 doesn't look good, does it? 1x and 6x. Okay, and this is the process we go through, right? Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it takes several tries. Okay, cross multiplying this time, I get negative 30x plus 4x, negative 26x. Right, let me switch the 4 and the 5 again. So now I get negative 24x plus 5x, and there, that one worked. Negative 19x, so that's the correct combination. So sometimes you just have to keep trying until you find the right one. So we have x minus 4 times 6x plus 5 equals 0. Now what? Set each one equal to 0. And then solve each equation, okay? So we're going to add 4, so we get x equals 4. Here we're going to subtract 5, so we get 6x equals negative 5, and then divide by 6. X equals negative 5 over 6. Okay? And try one on your own before we do our quiz. Okay, here's one more. Let's do 5n squared plus 8n plus 3 equals 0. Okay, do that one on your own. Okay, so we're going to factor. This is the Murray method. Anytime there's something other than a 1 in front, it's the Murray method, okay? So we're doing 5n times 1n. And then over here, I'm going to do 3 and 1, positive 3 and positive 1. When we cross multiply, it has to add up to 8n. So we get 5n plus 3n, and that equals 8n. Now we cross multiply to check it. The actual factors go straight across like that. So this factors as 5n plus 3 times n plus 1. I don't need the 1 in front of the n. Equals 0. Okay, don't take any shortcuts. Write it all out. Okay, this means that 5n plus 3 equals 0, and n plus 1 equals 0. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. 5n equals negative 3. And then we're going to divide by 5. N equals negative 3 over 5. There's one of my answers. And the other one, we're going to subtract 1 from both sides, so n equals negative 1. There's my other answer. Okay? Okay, let's put your books away. Grab a calculator if you need a calculator to help you with the factoring. We're going to do our quiz.
There you go. Common students.
Jason, I really thought you were supposed to only go for tests.
Well, Ms. Schilling said I could go for quiz and tests.
So why did you go down the other day to do classwork?
I asked and she said I could go.
Okay, I don't want you doing that.
Yeah.
Because you need to learn how to work in the classroom.
Okay.
If you're going to be in the classroom, you got to learn how to work in the classroom. You can't just go into your private little room every time, right? Yeah, I didn't like that. Because I never let you go for classwork. Right?
Yeah.
I feel like you just took advantage of her.
Thank you.
Okay, you can go this time until I get clarification from Ms. Shirley.
So I can?
Mhm.
Drew, will you give me one too?
You need to come up as soon as you finish that with it, okay?
You want me to bring it with me or not?
Everybody's got a calculator? Papers away?
I am so sorry. Okay, so
You check on my desk. I picked up a couple. Take your time, you have the rest of the period, so it's about 35 minutes. Leave that problem up on the board for just a couple minutes and then I'm going to turn it off.